It's time to turn your life-challenging moments into life-changing messages. Welcome to the PowerLift Stories Podcast, where we are interviewing women whose stories will leave you lifted up, fired up, and fueled up with hope, courage, and inspiration. We want to thank our sponsor, Powerful Journey, who helps women tell their stories, write their books, and building a profitable brand around both. Join the masterclass or the Speakers Academy at phyllisjenkins.com. That is PHYLLISJENKINS.com. Now here's your host, Phyllis Jenkins.
The pom-poms are out, and that means we're celebrating something. I just had a very fun interview, which you'll see in just a minute. But let me just say to you, we have our Authors Academy. Open enrollment is going on right now. We only do it once a year, and this is your time to jump in if you would like to become a published author. So if you are ready and you've been saying, I want to write a book, now is your time to jump in, because we won't open it up again until next year, 2024. You have until May 31st to jump into the new Authors Academy class. But we also have our Writer's Journey. That is our weekly community of writers that you can jump into that as well. Or we have coming up this year, our Telling Our Stories Anthology, Volume 3, if you would like to be a co-author in a collaboration with other authors in our Telling Our Stories Anthology book. So that is another way that you can tell your story. And then the third way is to do private coaching with me, but I only have 2 slots left for that. So if you're interested in either of those, the Authors Academy, the Writer's Journey, the Telling Our Stories Anthology, or the private coaching, reach out to us. Okay, let's move now into today's interview. Enjoy, because I had a lot of fun doing it.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the podcast today. I am so excited to be your guest host for today because we have a very special guest. But before I introduce her, I'll go ahead and just tell you that I'm Elizabeth Fisher. I work with Phyllis as part of the Powerful Journey, and I'm so excited to get to share her with you today. So today, instead of being the host and being the one asking the questions, she's going to be the guest today. And it's all because we have a really special milestone today. And so, Phyllis, would you like to share what is special about this episode?
I will, and I'm bringing in the pom-poms. You guys know when I bring in the pom-poms, that means something big is happening. So this is our 100th episode today. So we are celebrating our 100th episode on the podcast. So thank you for being here. Yes. And Elizabeth, thank you so much for hosting today.
Oh, yes. Well, I'm so excited to get to hear your experiences, especially focused here on the podcast, but just overall the things that you have learned and what this journey has been like for you as well. So I'm really excited to dive into that today. And what a big milestone too. 100 episodes is such a special thing. I love that we have those kind of markers along the way where we can take a look and see just what's happened over that amount of time, and just how God has been at work through the podcast here over 100 episodes and going on from here. So
absolutely.
Well, so the first thing I kind of wanted to start with is just to hear your vision for why you started the podcast. And since you already had so many things in place for the Powerful Journey, what was it about starting a podcast that really compelled you to, that was the next thing that you needed to do?
I was looking for something else to allow women to tell their stories and to get it out there. So I see the podcast as an extended stage for them to take their stories to the stage. And as you know, my goal is to get 100,000 women to tell their stories, to take their stories to the stage, simply because their stories are making a difference in the lives of others. And so this was just another way to get them to keep stepping forward to share their stories.
I love that. And I love that each episode is really focused on telling their story and giving them that platform, like you shared, to be able to share what they've learned along the way and do a version of their story here on the podcast. I love that that's your vision for it. And I think that's such a special application of it too. And so as you think back over the past 100 episodes here, I'm curious to know if there are maybe themes that you've seen in stories or episodes that have really stood out to you, maybe some of the most listened to episodes. I know before we got on, you shared that you had done some research on that. So what has stood out to you over the last 100 episodes?
Yeah, I did look back, and to answer the first part of your question, the theme that seems to weave into every episode, every story is overcome. I've overcome something. And I just want to say to everyone listening or watching today that you've overcome something, whether it's small or whether it's big, you've still overcome something. And so that makes you an overcomer. You're victorious over something. And we celebrate those, whether it's small or big. But I did go back, Elizabeth, and look at some of the episodes that have been the most watched. And the first episode, I want to start with number 1 with Cheryl Jones. It was From Tragedy to Triumph. And Cheryl shared how the passing of her baby boy, how that fueled her to go on and start a business where she is helping other parents who have had a special needs child. She shares her story with them. And when she does, she's automatically connecting to them because they know that she does know what they're going through. And so that was episode number 1. Episode number 3 was another one of our most popular episodes. And it was an interview with me. My other assistant, Lori Valobaskin, interviewed me. And the title of that one was Soaring in My 60s While Battling a Brain Aneurysm. And that was where I wanted to share my story after being diagnosed with a brain aneurysm, and just to encourage those that were listening and those who are listening today, that no matter what you've been dealt with, you can let that fuel you to keep moving on and not stop. Matter of fact, I wrote a book entitled Brain Aneurysm, What Did You Come to Teach Me? And there were many lessons that were learned that I wanted to share with others. And then I looked at episode number 6 with Gwen Prelow, and it was Don't Cast Away Your Confidence. It will pay off. And so that too has touched many lives and can still encourage those today that whatever it is that you have, that you've put before the Lord and you've put your hope and your confidence in, don't cast it away, as Gwen said. Keep on keeping on and watch God work through that. So that was great. And then another episode was with Cynthia Dotson Brown that said, Cancer brought me to a place of peace. That right there, just the topic itself would bring someone who is experiencing not just cancer, but any disease, that searching in search for peace in the midst of the storm. That was good with Gwen. And then another one with Marielle Landrum was titled Crohn's Disease Didn't Win. So actually, there's a theme as I'm looking at this now. There's a theme with the ones that have been the most watched, from tragedy to triumph, soaring in my 60s while battling an brain aneurysm. Don't cast away your confidence. It will pay off. Cancer brought me to a place of peace. And then now Crohn's disease didn't win. So that can be said of any disease that someone is battling. Marielle brought great hope as she shared her experience of winning over that particular disease. And then our 99th episode was with Angela Hayes, who just stepped off of the stage of our Powerful Journey Women's Conference. And her title is Pushed into Purpose, which is the title of her new book as well. And she has an amazing story that she could have allowed to drag her down, to take her through a period of just being depressed, but she didn't. She allowed it to fuel her. There's that word again, fuel her and push her into purpose.
I love that. And I love that even as you started off with saying that overcome has been the theme. I hear overcome in the stories that you've been sharing here in those most watched episodes, that's a theme that people seem to resonate with. And I think it's such an important theme that we need to keep going back to, that we need that encouragement to hear how God has helped other people to overcome, and to be reminded that he can help us to do the same in the things that we're facing. So it's no surprise to me that those are some very common themes that people are gravitating to. I love that. And so as you think about one of the things that always touches me, I think, as I hear the stories of the ladies and a few men that you walk through this journey with, whether it's hearing them on the podcast or it's in the Writer's Journey, the Authors Academy, the conference that we just had a few weeks ago, that people are sharing their stories, and these are such personal and deeply meaningful stories, and that you get the joy and the privilege and the responsibility of walking alongside them as they prepare to share these things that are really meaningful, that it's just such a special space where they're sharing their stories. I'm curious to hear, as you've been through this process now of guiding so many people through this in a variety of different formats, what that's been like for you to have that honor and that responsibility of helping them to share their stories and kind of walking with them through that process, which is a joyful process, but also a difficult process at times. So what has that been like for you?
It is indeed. Thank you for asking that. It has been a remarkable journey, in that I get to do this with them. I get to walk with them through this. Many of them are sharing their stories publicly for the first time. They've kept it down inside of them. And this is my God assignment. And he has equipped me to be able to pull off those layers, just like an onion, pulling off each of the layers gently pulling them off, but then also pushing them as well. To get out and tell their stories, because one of the things that I share with each of my clients is that once you take that stage, or once you get on this podcast, your story is no longer yours. It's not about you. It's about those that are sitting in the audience that need to hear your story. It's about those who are in the airways that are hearing this, that are watching this, that need to hear your story, because the lessons learned and what they've been through, many times Elizabeth goes out and gives that person a big hug and let them know you're not alone and you can be victorious, because God brought me through it. He can bring you through it as well. And so there have been many times when we've cried together. I've cried with my client. There have been many times when we've cheered. I've cheered with them, cheered them on, because there was a breakthrough, and they were seeing the full picture, the big picture, so to speak, of what God had brought them through and why he had brought them through it. And you'll often hear me say, if you've been watching any of my episodes, don't take your story to the grave. And that's what I believe. I believe, Elizabeth, that the graveyard is one of the richest places on earth. And matter of fact, there is a quote from the late Dr. Miles Monroe that says just that it is the richest place on earth, and there lies within the grave yard, the cemetery, there lies businesses that were never launched, the books that were never published. And then I'm just going to add stories that were never told that need to be told. So that is, it's an honor and a privilege that I get to pull that story out and to bring life to it so that it can go beyond them. I often say to myself that this God assignment is so much bigger than me. It is indeed his assignment with a greater purpose than I could ever have imagined.
I love that. And I love even just, I think we've been working together probably coming up on a year, and even just in this year, how many stories I've already gotten to hear being told and getting to see the impact of that. Even if it's just little glimpses that I see here and there, I know that the authors are seeing so much more. I know you're seeing so much more of what that impact actually is. But even just in the bit that I have seen so far, just to see how the stories are already making a difference. And even just thinking in my own life about different trials that I've walked through. And I remember one in particular, I was diagnosed with anxiety disorder. And I remember encountering a few people that had anxiety, and how much hope it gave me to see, okay, they made it through. They're still living their lives, and they're still they figured out how to do this, and just how much hope that gave me. And so when I hear these stories, I know how well timed that can be, and how much that can make a difference, and give them a hug, like you said, be that encouragement, and give them those tools that they need in order to move forward in their own stories. So and so as you think too about the things that the stories you've heard here over the 100 episodes, and the themes that have been shared, I'd love to hear too what your personal takeaways have been as you think back, whether it's on maybe your personal applications of the things that you've seen, or what it's been like for you to record these 100 episodes and to be part of these stories. And so any of your personal takeaways, and maybe even especially focused on how it's helped you to share your story too, because I know you're still very actively sharing your story. In fact, we talked about how one of those episodes is your own story. And so I'd love to hear how that's impacted that as well.
It's a great question, simply because I've been so into helping others to tell their stories that one day, and I think it was Lori who said, Phyllis, people need to hear your story. You need to tell your story more. And so now at every conference, because there are new people that come, I have begun to tell my story more. But I was so focused on helping others to tell their stories. And the way it has impacted me, Elizabeth, is that no story is too small to share, because there's someone out there that's needing to hear your takeaways, your lessons learned, because they're walking in your shoes. And as I mentioned earlier, this project, this assignment is so much bigger than me. It's just it has taken on a life of its own, but then even as I say that, it has taken the direction that God meant for it to take. I received so many testimonials from others who heard that person standing on stage, sharing their stories, and how it has helped them. It has given them hope, inspiration, encouragement, and called them to action, to move. I believe that just telling your story is not enough. I believe that once we tell our story, there should be someone on the other end that's ready to move to action because of what they've heard through your story. So those are a few of my takeaways from what God has called me to do. And I just look forward to continuing. The other thing that I've learned is there's no age limit to telling your story.
Yes.
There was a mother and a daughter that were in my office one day, and the mother was doing private coaching with me. And at the end of her session, her daughter looked at me, and she was 16 at the time. And Sarah said, "Mrs. Jenkins, I have a story to tell." And she stood on the stage at one of our Powerful Journey Women's conferences and shared her story. And when she did, there was not a dry eye in the building. I looked at Mrs. Thelma Bird, who is now 100 years old, but shared her story at age 99 in the Telling Our Stories anthology, and how her story at age 99 made a difference in the lives of so many others. And so there is no age limit to telling your story. There is no too big or too small of a story to tell. I've heard people say, Elizabeth, after they've left the conference, "Mrs. Jenkins, I haven't been through all of that, so I don't have a story." Well, yes, you do have a story. You have a story to tell, no matter how big or how small you feel it is. Matter of fact, you might feel that your story is small, but to someone else who's walking through the exact same thing, it's not small. It's the biggest thing that they can have you share at that moment in their lives. So no story is too small to share.
I love that. I love that. And I think that's such a powerful thing that you just shared there too, that your story, no matter how big or small it feels to you, is exactly what that person needs. It is a huge thing to them. That is exactly the encouragement or the resources that they need, the steps, having someone who has walked through that and being able to speak back to them in the midst of something that they're walking through right then is just, it's priceless. There's just, that's such a wealth of wisdom and experience to be shared in that. So, and then one of the things that I would love to wrap up here with Phyllis, and this has been so good. I've loved hearing your perspective on this and what it's been like for you kind of behind the scenes in this and your own story in this. But I know there's probably people who are watching this, listening to this today, who they know that it's their time to tell their story, but they don't necessarily know what that first step is. And so I wonder if you could maybe give even a few maybe practical ideas, things that they can go and do today or this week that could be some starting points for this, and just any encouragement you'd want to share with them, because we know that there are so many obstacles that hold people back from sharing their stories. And so any words of encouragement you'd want to share and just some practical steps for getting started in that.
Well, thank you. I would say, first of all, that your story, if you're on the other side of it, meaning God has brought you through, then you have to tell it. You must tell your story because there is someone who needs to hear it. And as far as how to begin, I'm going to share with you some of the ways that I have my clients to walk through the My Significant Story Blueprint. And if you would like to have a copy of that, then send me an email or go to phyllisjenkins.com. That's PhyllisJenkins.com. And you can download a PDF of that blueprint. But simply, Elizabeth, to answer your question, for that person who doesn't know where to start, the first thing that I would say is to get in front of a blank page or a blank screen, whether it's a Word doc or pages or whatever, and write down 3 of the most difficult, unusual situations that you've been through. Jot down 3. Then in the next column, I want you to write down the lessons that you learned in each of those situations. After you've written down the lessons that you've learned in each of those situations, then the next column is for you to write down, what can you teach someone else from those lessons that you've learned? Jot down at least 3 for each story, for each lesson learned. And that becomes your foundation of sharing your story, because what you'll do then next is to look to see which lessons learned can be the most impactful to someone else. And Elizabeth, actually, they have 3 different stories, 3 different sets of lessons learned, 3 different sets of lessons that they can teach to someone else. So depending on who the audience is, they can choose from which story to tell, which story would be the most impactful at that moment. So that is just a simple, practical way that you can get started today if you haven't begun sharing your stories with others.
I love that. I love that. And I love that we have different stories. And I love that sometimes it can be, I think that's one of the obstacles people run into is, well, I have so many different stories. Where do I start with that? And so I love how you give that really practical way to get some clarity in that, and move through that to be able to start sharing a story. And maybe you come back to it too. Maybe there's multiple book ideas or multiple things to be shared within that too. So I love that. Well, thank you so much for this conversation, Phyllis. This has been really wonderful. I was gonna end a different way, but as we've been talking here, I kind of want to pray for the Powerful Journey podcast here as we close out. But before I do, I wonder if there's any closing thoughts you'd want to share, or anything else that you'd like to share about the podcast journey here over these last 100 episodes.
I want to speak to the person who wants to start their own podcast. You have that desire. Yeah. You have that desire deep in you, and you're waiting for the perfect moment to jump out and do it. There is no perfect moment. Start by doing. And don't try to make it perfect. There have been some episodes where I did no edits whatsoever. Matter of fact, Elizabeth, one of the most watched episodes recently was a blooper that I did. That I decided to share. I was going to delete it, and then all of a sudden I said, "Oh, let me share this with my audience to let you know that things don't go perfect, but it's okay, and to not let that hold you back. That can become a distraction. It can keep you in the field of procrastination, which you'll never move forward if you continue to allow that to happen. So just move forward and do it. If you need some more mentoring with starting your podcast or some encouragement, just reach out to me. I'm more than happy to share with you, simply because I've seen the impact, the lives that have been changed just by me jumping out and saying, yeah, I'm going to start it. And Elizabeth, I will tell you, when I jumped out and started the podcast, it was September of 2020. I chose a date. I chose a date that I was going to do it, and I did it. And then after I did it and released it, I said, oh my goodness, what have I done? Because consistency has to be the key to keeping it going, and anything going that we try, that we seek to do. So again, I just want to say, if you have that desire to start your own podcast because you have something to share with the world, do it. Do it this week. jump out and just do it? Thanks for asking that question.
Yes, I love that. And I think that's such a great word of encouragement in podcasting and just in general, and sharing your story, that you don't have to wait until it's perfect, and that procrastination can hold you back. And it's time to get started. So I love that. And just thank you so much for this great conversation, Phyllis. And I so appreciate your heart for wanting to help others to share their stories. And I know that there's a ripple effect as they go out and they share their stories, and that impacts people who then are impacted and go out and impact others. And you've just done such incredible work. It's been my honor to get to support you in that and get to just get a front row seat for how you're doing this, and just your heart for this. So thank you for that. And I will go ahead and close us out with a prayer. Then I'd love to pray for the podcast and the powerful journey. So
thank you, Elizabeth.
Dear Heavenly Father, I just want to thank you so much for Phyllis and the work that you've been doing through the powerful journey here over these 100 episodes of the podcast, and over the years that the powerful journey has been at work in helping women and men to share their stories. And Lord, I pray for your continued blessing. I thank you for all the things that you've already done, all the people that have been impacted. And I thank you for the people that are still ahead to be impacted by the stories that have been shared and the stories that will be shared. I pray for your guidance for Phyllis and the whole powerful journey team here at every step. And I just pray that you would bless the works of their hands, that there would be much fruit ahead, and just that you would get all the glory as stories are shared and lives are impacted. And I pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Elizabeth, thank you so much for being a part of the 100th episode. And I'm so grateful that God has sent you to be a part of the Powerful Journey team. So thank you again. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. If you are interested in being on the show, go to phyllisjenkins.com. You can also sign up for the Powerful Journey Masterclass or the Speakers Academy at phyllisjenkins.com.